Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to Prog Chattery 777. Well, folks, after a very long journey discussing the albums of Rush, we have made it to their most recent studio album, Clockwork Angels, released in 2012. This is their 19th studio album of original material. And you know what? Who would have thunk that just as the band was approaching their 40th anniversary of Neil Peart joining the band, that they would release one of their finest albums. And I say that very seriously. I think this is an absolutely fantastic album. This is a very special album in their catalog. The band was just so driven to truly make the very best Rush album they could possibly make. And I know that's a cliche. You know, every band says, oh, this album we're going to try and make the best album we've ever done. But, you know, there's a real legitimate effort to this album, and they really deliver. Like I said, it is one of their finest albums in their whole catalog, and I'm delighted to say that seriously. You know, if there is such a thing as an ultimate Rush album, this is probably it, because I think it contains elements from every single period of their career. You know, right away, the album is very, very heavy. It's also very melodic, so that covers your kind of 90s, 2000s period of Rush. And the 80s are covered in a kind of a different way. You know, the whole album has a string section, and there's these beautiful orchestrations using these strings, and it goes all the way through the album, and it gives the album a very dense, grand, big feel, and it's a very textured sound, which is similar to what was going on in the 80s. The only difference is that in the 80s they were orchestrating their songs with synthesizers. Now they're orchestrating the songs with a proper string section, so that's really cool. And the third, probably most important element that makes this album so awesome is the grand return to progressive rock. This is a proper prog album, this is. And you could argue that, you know, throughout the 80s, 90s, and 2000s that, you know, they'd always contained those proggy elements, but, you know, they had kind of moved away from that arena. And with this album, it is fully embraced on multiple levels. The progressive thing is there both musically and lyrically. You know, musically it's obvious because, you know, the songs are given these much more expanded arrangements, and you know, it's kind of the return to that classic Rush instrumental section at times, where the whole band just goes apeshit with a crazy roller coaster arrangement that kind of dazzles the mind and blows the ears away, and then goes back into the beat. You know, that's a classic Rush thing from the prog years that is brought back on this album to fine form. There's also fantastic guitar solos on this album. You know, I said, you know, later day Rush kind of lacks in the guitar solos, but there's lots of great guitar solos on here. And I mean, not just the guitar, but I mean the bass and the drums. The whole band is just operating at their absolute peak, and it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal music. And finally, on the lyrical end of things, probably the most significant factor of this album is that this is a concept album. It is actually the Rush's very first proper concept album with a consistent storyline that runs its way all the way through the album from start to finish. You know, and don't go around saying that 2112 is a concept album or Hemispheres is a concept album. You know, they do have the extended songs that tell stories, but, you know, the whole album isn't a storyline. So in that regard, this being their first concept album is both something kind of retro in that it references their earlier conceptual prog heyday, but it's also something new in that they'd never actually done the story throughout the entire album. So that's really, really cool. As for the story itself, I mean, I must confess that, you know, I don't really know the details of the story that well. I know the basic idea. We have a protagonist that is on a journey to conquer his dreams, basically. And this journey to conquer his dreams takes him through this bizarre sort of fantasy world that's, you know, loaded with all kinds of steampunk imagery. And I know alchemy has a lot to do with this world and whatnot, as seen by the alchemy symbols on the album cover. So there's a great imagery to a lot of the album, and you know, it marks the return to that kind of fantasy style of lyric writing that Peart really hadn't touched on since the 70s. So again, that's a retro thing. So that's really, really, really cool. And you know, it's funny, even though I don't really know the fine details of the story, it doesn't matter, because, you know, the music and the album as a whole works together so well that by the time you get to the end of it, you do feel like you've been taken on a journey. You feel like you've started at one place and you've ended at another, which is exactly what a concept album should do. So even though I don't really know the story per se, you know, I'm still, you know, emotionally I'm there the whole time, and you know, you do get that big payoff at the end, and you feel, wow, this was a listening adventure, a proper listening adventure. So that's absolutely fantastic. And you know, it's interesting that you know they would come back and do the prog thing at the end of their career because you know, even though it is in a lot of ways it's the only later day Rush album that I think you know you can fairly compare to 2112, A Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres, because it's in that prog mindset. But it still is different, you know. Like this is a progressive album, you know, made while seeing through the lens of experience. You know, all those other elements of Rush's career in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s are still present, even though they are kind of going back to that prog thing. So that's really really cool. And you know, like I said, on the whole, it is just an absolutely fantastic album. And the band is just so driven, and I think, you know, it's certainly the best album they did since Moving Pictures. There's a vitality to it, and there's an energy, and you can tell that, you know, the whole band members are just the whole band is just so driven at this point. And you know, like I said, there's a vitality on this record that hasn't been there, arguably, you know, since Moving Pictures. That's kind of a controversial thing because you know I still love the '80s albums. I still love a lot of the '90s albums. But I mean, this is just something so special. It also brings up the other question with Rush is, you know, this could well be the very last studio album that we get from the band. And you know, as much as I hate to say that, I also kind of look at this and I say, what a grand finale. This is the ultimate way to go out on a high. You know, end with one of your very best albums. End a 40-plus year career with one of the best things you've ever done. You know, I think it would be very difficult for the band to follow this album up afterwards. Not that they couldn't. I mean, surely they could, but I don't know. There's just something. This is the closest to perfection, I think, as a whole, in their catalog. So it is really something special. You know, obviously Rush have announced at this point that long-term touring is a thing of the past. You know, Neil has graciously and gracefully retired from doing the touring thing, and that's okay. You can't blame him. It's a hard lifestyle, and they've been doing it for, like I said, 40+ years. You know, it's time that it's about time that they enjoy their home life a little bit, I would say. But they've never ruled it out. They said, you know, they may do the odd gig here and there, or they may get together and do, you know, some recordings, but, you know, I think it would be cool if Rush would do, like, the odd single. But they will never, I don't, like, this is just such a perfect album. It feels like a grand finale. It's a great way to go out, in my opinion. As much as I hate to say it, because we all need more Rush music in our lives. But, you know, all that said, this is just a very special album, and it is one of my very favorites. It's wonderful. So let's move this video along, and we'll try to dissect the tracks here. So the album opens with Caravan. Now this is the first song I heard off the album. It was released like a year before the album came out, and I remember I was in my car, and I heard it during the middle section. I remember hearing the bass. I was like, that sounds like Geddy. And then, you know, the drums and guitar all come in. It's like, this is definitely Rush. And I was just blown away because the middle section of Caravan is just all over the place. It's back to that. You know, it's almost got maybe a Permanent Waves kind of vibe. You know, Free Will's got a really cool instrumental section, but the instrumental section on Caravan is just, it's just such classic Rush, and I mean classic as in like the '70s sense. So I remember I was delighted when I heard it, but the song as a whole is great. You know, the very intro, I love, you know, you kind of get those weird bell sounds, and that first little guitar line. There's also a little bit of synthesizer in that intro as well, so there's the return of the synths. But yeah, just what a great riff. You know, there's a great frenzy. I love that. There's all kinds of cool rhythmic things like that, and there's just a frenzy. You know, one of those great lines. You know, the caravan thunders onward. That's just it, and the music behind it is just going apeshit, and it's great. You know, one of Peart's greatest, you know, drum arrangements. You know, Peart sounds like he's 25 again. You know, the drums are all over the place. There's all kinds of these cool rhythmic variations as the first verses come along, and yeah, what can I say? It's just great. And then, you know, I've already talked about the middle section, but the middle section is just a roller coaster. They go all over the place. You know, this is Rush doing Dream Theater, which is interesting because Rush kind of made Dream Theater back in the '70s. So it's cool how these bands kind of feed off of each other. But it does have such a classic Rush sound to it. There's their highlight, that descending bass line. And the drum variations. I'm rambling like a crazy maniac, but it's because Caravan is an ace song and one of the best songs. One of the great Rush songs, if you ask me. It's heavy, it's progressive, and it's got that modern edge to it. So that's ace. You need Caravan in your life. You must listen to Caravan if you like Rush. We move on to track 2. We got BU2B, or Brought Up to Believe. Nice big heavy riff off the right off the bat, or we kind of get like a pensive sort of intro, a little bit of acoustic guitar, but once the riff comes in, one of the heaviest riffs Rush had ever done, really. And yeah, really good song. There's almost like an indie rock flavor to parts of it, like those very urgent chords that Lifeson throws during the verses. They're just weird chords, and they have that kind of edgy, dissonant feel, and that sounds like, you know, modern indie bands to me. So that's kind of a cool modern influence that is over the album as well. But yeah, Brought Up to Believe, great track. I love like the middle section when it kind of has that little ascending bit. There's a great energy. Really good stuff. Great track. I never saw Rush on the actual Clockwork Angels tour, but I did see them perform both Caravan and BU2B at during the Time Machine tour, which is really cool. Yeah, great stuff. Good track. Good second track. We move on to track 3, Clockwork Angels. This is something very special. You know, this is a good old slice of progressive rock right here. It's got all those classic elements. You know, it's the closest thing. You know, there's a couple songs on here that are more like their classic epics. You know, there's nothing any longer than, you know, 8 minutes on here. It's not like, you know, they're not doing the 20-minute thing or even the 10-minute thing, but, you know, these songs do have multi-sections to them, and they do kind of take you on like a little journey all in of themselves, and Clockwork Angels is a great example of that. Yeah, the very intro is really cool. We kind of get those, you know, I don't know, I guess sacred is the word that comes to mind, where, you know, Geddy's just kind of doing this little vocal thing, and a little bit of synthesizers come in, and then Peart comes in with that 6/8, and then the whole band comes in. We get Lifeson with those nice thrashy chords, so grand, so epic, and it just builds up, and then the verses are really good. Like the first verses that have that slow arpeggio on the guitar, they've almost got like a nostalgic feel. There's almost a subtle sort of melancholy, but the song switches back and forth, goes from the kind of melancholy verse back into so it's all over the place. And again, having those arrangements where things are changing so drastically, both in tempo and tone, you know, it's just so proggy, and it's so great. One of my favorite tracks on the album, Clockwork Angels bathed in light. So wicked. And the middle section is really cool. It goes into like a really bluesy sort of a section where you get some nice slide guitar on the acoustic. And then Geddy's kind of singing through like a megaphone sort of effect, so that's really cool as well. Yeah, it's just so epic, you know. Clockwork Angels, the people raise their hands. There's some great clips on YouTube of them playing this song, and that moment in the arenas where you see the whole crowd lift their hands up. That's one of those great spine-chilling moments. Yeah, Clockwork Angels, what can be said? The title track is an absolute Rush classic, one of my favorites on the album. This is the first one that, you know, when I heard the whole album, that really stood out to me and got me in the guts. Great stuff. We move on to track 4, The Anarchist. So this is a pretty cool song. Again, it's following through that with the whole proggy thing. There's lots of different sections to it. I really like the sort of ascending riff. There's something so classic. There's a Rush thing to that riff. That dun 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 dun. That's a very Rush thing. I don't know. It takes me back to I don't know, like Analog Kid kind of stuff, maybe, or you know, Circumstances. I'm not really too sure, but it is there's a thing about that. The Anarchist also really introduces us to the power of the orchestra. The orchestra really comes in at a few moments, and like I said, it gives the song a much denser, more grand, you know, like operatic sort of a feel. And the orchestra really, or the string section really does put, you know, goosebumps on your hands, for me anyway. There's a great moment in the Anarchist towards the end when the strings are just, operating at peak frequency, and Geddy's doing that ascending riff. He's doing that underneath, and that's just a great, a great moment of awesome in terms of, arranging and how these songs were put together. Great track. This is one that they brought back out for the R40 tour, so it's one of the surviving songs off the album. They really could have played anything from this album. It would have been pretty cool, to be honest. But yeah, Anarchist is a really good track, but I think I like the first three a little bit more. But that's okay, you don't have to like everything at the same level. I mean, at the end of the day, they're all really awesome songs. But yeah, moving on to track 5, Carnies, one of my favorites on the album. Great track. I love that the intro kind of has these weird, demented sort of carnival sounds. I think in the concept, this is a part when our protagonist joins a traveling carnival. I get that idea anyway, Carnies. But yeah, just great, explosive, heavy, dirging riff at the start. So that's really cool. Again, some of the heaviest stuff Rush had ever done. And the chorus comes in, it's just really, really, really good. There's a great melody there. Dun, da, da, dun, 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 dun. And what's the line? One of my favorite lines that comes in. It's one of the highlights. Will a fate a game of chance? That's a great moment. But the real highlight for Carnies for me is, again, the instrumental section. It goes bonkers about halfway through, and we get that really fast. I think that's really, really cool. It goes into a whole, little instrumental section. We get a reprise of the chorus, and then it finishes with that. Finishes back with that. That's just classic Rush for me. I love those tempo changes. They're so. It's woo. And I mean, it's typical of the whole album. All of the songs on this album have so many like little unexpected twists and turns and moments of oh wow, and it's great. That's another one of the many reasons that this is one of their finest moments. We move on. We go to track 6, Halo Effect. Now this is a little bit more mellow, which is good. It helps with the flow and ebb of the album, if you like. It's almost an acoustic song. We get the nice kind of, lush acoustic guitars at the start that kind of bring the verse in. But then we get a great chorus, and it's a great example of, Rush's, more disciplined traditional songwriting. It's a great chorus, it's a great melody, fool that I was. Yeah, it's great, and it's nice that there is something, a little bit simpler and a little easier to digest that's still included on the album. It's only about 3 minutes. But hey, even the best prog albums need to have that little breathing moment, I guess. But yeah, great track. Definitely a fan. We keep on moving on with track 7, 7 Cities of Gold. Another classic, another absolute Rush classic. I love that very intro. That's a great little bit of Geddy on the bass. You can hear the Les Claypool influence, or rather you can hear Geddy's influence on Les Claypool on that track, that intro in particular. But it all winds its way in, and it just goes into that riff. That's one of the great Rush riffs. It's so good. And then how grand when the verse first kicks in, a man could lose himself in a country like. So very good. And there's a great chorus. I love as the chorus, winds up and it goes into the halftime, and it just gets slow and dirgy and heavy. 7 cities of gold. This is great stuff, and it's an extended piece. There's lots of cool little sections in it, and unexpected twists and turns. Great track. What more can be said? 7 Cities of Gold, another highlight. Moving on, track 8, I believe. We get The Wreckers. Now this is a great song. It's true with a lot of the songs, actually. Even though it is a concept album and the songs do all belong together in the order that they've been put together, you can take a lot of these songs out of the context of the album and they still sound great. And The Wreckers is a great example of that. It's got one of the most powerful choruses Rush ever wrote. It's very catchy, it's very melodic, and it's grand. The orchestra, the string section really highlights The Wreckers. I just love that chorus, that all I know is that sometimes you have to be wary. there's something so Rush about that. There's an earnestness to the lyrics. You know, it works well in context of the concept, and it works well as a song along onto itself. It's just fantastic. And like I said, when that chorus comes in towards the end and the orchestra is operating at full, you know, their full frequency, full amplitude, I can't help. I did my whole body. I'm thinking about it right now. I've got goosebumps just thinking about that big chorus. It's just utterly fantastic. I will say Records is, you know, it's not top tier for the album, but on an album where every song is great, it's still great. You know. We'll move on. We're almost towards the grand finale now. We get Headlong Flight as track 9 of the album, and this is up there with Caravan, Clockwork Angels, 7 Cities of Gold, Carnies. You know, it's another one of the epics of the album. Lots of different sections. It's a solid, you know, 7.5 minute song. I think originally Geddy and Alex intended Headlong Flight to be an instrumental. And it would have made a kick-ass instrumental, but I'm glad they put the lyrics on because the lyrics are fantastic on Headlong Flight. Again, it works great in the context of the album, and you could take it out and it works great as a standalone song. The playing on it is just so great. Really, really cool little intro, and you know, before the actual song itself starts, there's a little reference to Bastille Day. I'm quite certain whether that was like a conscious thing and they deliberately wanted to do that, or if it was just you know, coincidence that they happened to make that arrangement style again. But it's that big riff at the beginning, and then Peart and Geddy do that. So that's pretty much near exactly the same as the Bastille Day thing. So that might be a reference to the early days, or you know, they just may have been in that same mindset once again when they wrote that. But that's really, really cool. And again, like lyrically, the lyrics are so good on it because, like I said, it works with the concept, and it works with as just a song alone. And you know, it almost feels a little autobiographical. You know, it's Neil looking at his career with Rush and just going, wow, what a journey, this headlong flight that we took, and that repeating line, I wish that I could live it all again. Not only is that so grand, but I mean, you know, there's like I said, there's an autobiography about it. You know, it feels like he's talking about his life and times with this terrific band. So yeah, there you go, Headlong Flight. It's fantastic. And like I said, 7.5 minute song. There's lots of crazy instrumental bits in there. There's guitar solos. It's fantastic. Headlong Flight is ace. Now we're approaching the end of the album, the big grand finale. We get BU2B2, Brought Up to Believe 2. And this is just a little segue, really. It's just it's a little reprise of Brought Up to Believe, but it's just Geddy and the string section. So that's really, really interesting. There's nothing else like that in Rush's catalog. And even though it is just a Sieg, it does really well to, you know, link the whole concept together. It brings the whole album together, and you know, it does feel like, you know, this is not an album of songs. This is a complete work of art using songs. And yeah, BUB, it's really, really cool. Very dark, you know. The lyrics like you know, life gets harder. I can't think of the exact lyric right now. But it is, you know, it is a dark, sort of pensive, freaky moment in the album, and it's really cool. Cool little reprise, and it helps mold the concept together. We move on to track 11, Wish Them Well. This is a great track. It does kind of, you know, you're getting that sense of finale at this point, that you are working your way towards the end of the album. It's a great song. Again, there's that earnestness to the lyrics. You know, of all the people that have done you wrong, all you can really do is just wish them well and move on your own journey. But great chorus. All that you can do is wish them well. And then the background, Geddy, wish them well. That's really, really cool. The verses have a great melody as well. You know, it's a great track. Again, it's kind of like, you know, Records for me, in that it is, you know, a 9 out of 10 song on an album of 10 out of 10. So it's still somewhere slightly below the top tier, but it's still phenomenal. Yeah, great track. Wish them well. And finally, we get to track 12, The Garden. This is something very special. It's almost difficult to compare this song to anything else Rush has done, because there's nothing quite else like it in their catalog. But it is an utterly beautiful piece of music. It might be one of their best ever songs. And I'm not saying that in a sense of like, oh, this is my favorite, this is my personal favorite, or I think they performed well on this. It is just a perfectly arranged, powerful piece of music. There's a real emotional kicker behind it. You know, it's one of it's one of those few moments where you kind of get a tearjerker moment, which is exactly what a concept album should do. Everything should wrap up, and you should feel almost overwhelmed by this concept that you've kind of followed along emotionally rather than literally. But it's just so very good. It's very much in a ballad sort of a mood. It starts out just acoustic guitar and Getty. It's almost like the end of Hemispheres, but it does build up into its own little piece, and it's just fantastic. The orchestral stuff, the string section just elevates it to an 11 out of a 10 moment. It's so very good. I love the middle section too, where it gets very quiet, and there's a guest piano player on here. I feel bad as I'm forgetting his name. Jason Snyderman? Something? Maybe? Bear with me, folks. I want to get his name right, because the piano part in that is very nice. Yes, Jason Snyderman. He does this little middle section in the garden with just piano, and it's just Getty and the piano, and there's something so proggy about that, having a little piano bit towards the end of the album. And that great line, "Hope is what remains to be seen." And that's just great. And then it all builds itself up again, and it goes into the arpeggiated part, like Alex's little arpeggio. The orchestra just, again, like I said, takes it to an 11 out of 10. And you know, what's that big line? It's just a measure of a life. That's the line. That comes up towards the very end of that. And again, you just, like, how could they do another album when something ends on such a wonderfully high note like that? And it sums up their whole career. I mean, the album itself, obviously, but The Garden as well. As a final song, it says it all. It's a beautiful thing. It is a great thing that the album ends with such a highlight moment, because I was saying in a lot of the latter-day Rush albums, I mean, really, all the way back to like the 80s, from Presto onward, they had this terrible habit of just ending their albums with a song, sort of a mess song, an average song, and that's just how the albums would end. But they truly end it with a grand finale. And if you're going to do a concept album, you kind of need to have that big sweeping grand finale. So they achieved that excellently with The Garden. And there you have it. I talked about all the tracks. That is quite possibly the final studio album by Rush. As much as I hate to say it, as much as I'd love to see more Rush music be made, I also wouldn't want to see them, go ahead and do something after this, because it's a perfect summing up. It's just everything. It is the ultimate Rush album. It's got elements of every aspect of their career, and you need it. If you're a Rush fan, you need this in your life. It is one of their finest albums. It's the only album after Moving Pictures that I think you can fairly compare to any of the classic stuff. This is just as good as 2112. Actually, this is better than 2112. The album itself, that's controversial. The song 2112, yes, it is the ultimate thing. But 2112 as an album is one of those unbalanced things. This is a perfectly balanced album. So definitely better than 2112. Probably, arguably on par with A Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres. And those are really, for me, the top drawer Rush albums. So one of their finest moments. At the very tail end of their career, they delivered something very special, and it's just such a treat for the fans to have something like this. So to the members of Rush, I thank you for touring as long as you have, and for making all these wonderful albums of all this wonderful music. What a great band you are. So yeah, that'll be the end of the actual album chats, but I'm going to post another video just to sort of conclusion to Rush chats, if you like, because it has been a very fun journey. I want to talk about some of my thoughts and reflections on going over their entire career. So thank you so much for watching all this incoherent rambling. I know it's been a very long journey. I'm sure some of you watch a little bit and then watch another bit, because these videos get way too long. But yes, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in and watching these chats. Like I said, if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. And stay tuned. There's going to be more music to be discussed in the future. I'm not sure what yet, but stay tuned for more. So, thanks again, and you'll see me in the future. Farewell.